Greetings, this video will assess the outcome of a potential conflict between Venezuela and Brazil, the two leading military powers in Latin America. Relations between the two have deteriorated in recent years, with Brazil coordinating policy closely with the United States, calling for a military coup against the Venezuelan government and hinting at possible military action against its neighbor. The two countries share a land border over 2,000 kilometers long. Looking to aerial warfare capabilities, the Brazilian Air Force deploys a single class of fighter jet, the third-generation F-5E Tiger II. The aircraft is a modernization of the pre-Vietnam War era F-5A Freedom Fighter, and it saw its first flight in 1972. Developed as a low-cost platform for third-world states, it was never operated by the US Air Force in large numbers, and even in the 1970s was considered a low-end jet. The Venezuelan Air Force's primary frontline fighter is the Su-30 MKV heavyweight platform, a 4+ generation aircraft developed more than 30 years later than the F-5E. The jet is over 3 times as heavy as the F-5 and carries a radar over 4 times as large. Any engagements between these jets will be extremely one-sided. Venezuela also deploys the F-16A Fighting Falcon, which though old still retains an overwhelming advantage over the F-5 in performance across the spectrum, including in situational awareness, flight performance, and electronics. When comparing the two fleets, it is important to take their armaments into consideration. Brazil not only lacks active radar-guided missiles for its F-5s, but also lacks semi-active radar-guided missiles such as the AIM-7, meaning the jets are effectively completely impotent in beyond visual range air engagements. Venezuela's Su-30 can carry over triple the missile payload of the F-5E and still retain a massive advantage in maneuverability and range despite the extra weight. The fighters can deploy R-77 and R-27ER radar-guided long-range missiles. Given the power of the Su-30's sensors, the sophistication and quantities of the missiles deployed, and the massive distances involved, Brazilian fighters are unlikely to ever get within range to use their own missiles. The F-5E's modest flight performance and old electronics will provide a very high probability of kill for the Su-30's missiles. Venezuela's F-16s lack radar-guided missiles, but still retain an overwhelming advantage across the spectrum over the Brazilian F-5s. Brazil does deploy the EMB-145 light early warning aircraft, with a detection range comparable to that of the Su-30. The radar on the Su-30 is similarly powerful, although that on the F-5 remains extremely weak compared to both. Given Brazil's lack of any long-range anti-aircraft capability and the vulnerability of AEW aircraft to missile attacks, the country's air force will not be able to protect these assets from Venezuelan standoff attacks. Looking at both countries' air defense capabilities, the balance of power is, if anything, even more one-sided. Brazil's air defenses are restricted to very light and basic point defense systems such as the handheld Soviet 9K-38. Its airspace can thus be penetrated easily. Venezuela's multi-layered air defense network is by far the most advanced in the region. At the high end, it deploys the S-300VM, the second most advanced platform in the S-300 series, prized for its mobility, excellent situational awareness, and long range. Designed to engage high-end targets such as the American F-22, the F-5's survivability against the S-300 will be extremely low. The S-300 is supported by the Buck M2 and S-1252M medium-range platforms. These two are technologically several decades ahead of anything in Brazilian service, and sufficient to secure control of the skies. Venezuela's technological advantage in its aerial warfare capabilities is so overwhelming that it would be able to gain complete air superiority within 48 hours, possibly much sooner. Looking at ground forces, while Brazil's army is large, their weaponry leaves something to be desired, particularly in the field of armored warfare. Brazil is one of the few remaining operators of the Leopard 1 battle tank, a pre-Vietnam War era design which forms the mainstay of its armored units. Brazil also deploys the 60-year-old M60 and the even older M41. Brazil does not have any Vietnam War era or post-Vietnam War era designs in its inventory. The bulk of Venezuelan armored units are formed of tanks which are even older and less capable than those in Brazilian service, including the AMX-30, the AMX-13, and the Scorpion 90. Venezuela does deploy an elite of T-72B1 tanks with high composite armor, which Brazilian tanks are very unlikely to penetrate, and a modern 125mm cannon. Looking to artillery, Brazil deploys the Astros II platform, which in modernized variants boasts a formidable range. These highly mobile platforms can pose considerable threats to Venezuelan ground units. It also deploys the American M109, the most capable Western field artillery system developed. Venezuela also deploys formidable field artillery pieces, most notably the Russian Tu-S-19 howitzer, which has over triple the range of the M109. Venezuela deploys a much more diverse rocket force relying on Russian technology, which at the high end outperforms the Brazilian systems with the 9A-52 Smerch. These have a similar range to the Brazilian systems but are of a higher caliber and carry heavier payloads. For close air support, Brazil deploys the Mi-35M attack helicopter and the A-4 attack jet. It is the world's last major operator of the A-4, an aircraft which first flew in 1954. Venezuela deploys the more modern Mi-35M2 with similar capabilities, as well as the K-8 attack jet. When assessing air support capabilities, it is important to consider Venezuela's massive air superiority and air defense advantages, meaning Brazilian gunships and attack jets will most likely be denied the ability to operate. Shown here are the soldiers, reservists, and paramilitaries of both countries. Comparing frontline personnel, Brazil has a clear numerical advantage. Venezuela does not rely on conscription, however, and its soldiers on average receive more training. The training level of Venezuelan paramilitaries is also thought to be much higher. Brazilian airlifts will be prone to interception by Venezuelan aircraft and air defenses, and control of the air will provide considerable logistical advantages. Venezuela's air superiority will also allow for provision of air support for its ground troops, while its Su-30s deploy a range of munitions for precision strikes on Brazilian targets. Brazil's air force will not be able to provide comparable support. Strikes using Venezuela's advanced standoff munitions can be used to cripple Brazilian infrastructure and supply lines and destroy military bases. The Su-30's powerful sensors will allow Venezuela to better collect intelligence on Brazilian troop movements and coordinate its ground forces accordingly. Naval engagements are unlikely to play a major role in any potential conflict due to the sizable land border between the two countries and both navies' lack of modern anti-surface cruise missiles. Both navies are quite well balanced and their fleets are similarly out of date. While neither party's warships deploy modern air defense systems, this will factor strongly in Venezuela's favor. With control of the skies and access to a wide range of far more sophisticated anti-ship munitions, its long-range Su-30 fighters will be able to seriously threaten the Brazilian fleet. Ultimately, Venezuela's massive superiority in the air will likely prove decisive. Targets across Brazil will be in range of its precision strikes, allowing it to cripple the Brazilian war effort within hours and place key bases and other facilities under heavy bombardment. While a push by ground forces too deep into Brazil is unlikely due to the sheer size of its population and paramilitary forces, and the size of the country itself, Venezuela can press for concessions and potentially make some territorial gains. The result will be a Venezuelan victory gained primarily through overwhelming air superiority.